Good evening. It is my pleasure to welcome you here tonight. My name is Jennifer Bruce, and most of these students know me as their math teacher. However, tonight I am here as part of the team that has shepherded this senior class through their senior capstone experience. The students seated here in the first two rows are members of the 7th graduating class of Clayton-Bradley Academy. When CBA opened in 2013, the high school didn't exist. The following year, a small group of us embarked on a journey to build a high school that would act as the appropriate culminating experience for the educational model that begins for students here in lower school. Just to put it in perspective, these students were in 3rd grade when the high school opened. Okay. There simply aren't a lot of high schools out there that employ our educational model. So we really were, to steal a title from one of our upcoming presenters, starting from scratch. What would integrated projects look like for high school students? How would we effectively teach life skills and lifelong guidelines to teenagers? How should we organize the school day to have time to dig deeply into course content? And most importantly, what do we want a CBA graduate to look like? That journey of building a high school was sometimes rocky. Just like some of our presenters' projects you'll hear about tonight, we had to try some things out, realize they didn't accomplish what we wanted them to, and throw them out and start over. But a handful of things we did with that very first class accomplished exactly what we envisioned. And those things we've kept and nurtured because they define who we are, and they define what a CBA graduate is. 7 years ago, our first graduating class stood on this same stage and delivered their senior capstone presentations in exactly the same format that you will see tonight. It challenges every student to pull together all of the skills we've been crafting over their entire careers at CBA. Effective research, creativity, public speaking, initiative, problem solving, responsibility, critical thinking, and most importantly, being the drivers of their own learning. This course is called Summit for precisely this reason. This experience and these projects are the culmination of their entire educational journey at CBA. Tonight, class of 2024, you get to reach that summit one at a time. And this audience will get to see exactly what a CBA graduate is capable of. But seniors, you did not get to that summit alone, and it's important to stop and thank the people that helped you get there. First, my amazing colleagues, your teachers, coaches, and administrators who have helped shape you into the people you are today. Your family and friends who've supported and encouraged you every step of the way. And I want to say a special thank you to my co-captain in this capstone process, Senora Searle. As a brand new teacher to CBA this year, she was asked to jump into being a senior capstone instructor, and I think the students will agree with me that she's been an amazing mentor and coach to them in this process. I also want to thank the 15 judges in our audience, professionals from our community who volunteered their time to spend a couple of hours with us here this evening to evaluate and give constructive feedback to our presenters. One hallmark of CBA is that every project should have a public product, something the students share with someone beyond the classroom. This is only possible because the professionals like you are willing to give your time and talents. So we thank you. So it's time. Our first two presenters can head backstage. We will have two groups of presenters this evening with an intermission and more refreshments in between. In case you were not aware, it's really hard to speak for 5 to 7 minutes without using notes or a script. You'll notice I'm not trying that right now. Okay. We'd like to avoid distractions for the presenters, and so I please ask you to double and triple check that your phone is silenced. Seniors, that includes you. The only phone that rang last year actually did belong to a senior. Okay. I would also ask that you wait between breaks between presenters if you need to get up and leave the room for any reason. Okay. One of our presenters in the first half, you'll see in your program, Sophie Daniel, will be presenting artwork that involves some mature themes. So if you do have young children in the audience and you would not like for them to see that, when her name comes up on the screen, we'll give you a few seconds if you'd like to leave the room for that presentation. Our judges are welcome to move to the lighted tables in the back for the presentations they're judging, and then we just ask that you return to another seat as you watch presentations you're not evaluating. Okay. So, for the rest of us, let's sit back and enjoy. I am incredibly proud to present to you the senior capstone presentations of the Clayton-Bradley class of 2024.
When I was little, I was fully convinced that I was secretly a long-lost princess, and I had been mysteriously left on my parents' doorstep one morning. And I thought that I had the special ability to talk to little woodland creatures and birds, and that they would sing songs to me, and I would sing back about my Prince Charming that had yet to appear, and that I would one day look into a big body of water like every princess does and sing about the unknown and where I want to go. And I had this habit of drawing on everything, which is something that I still kind of have, but not nearly to the extent that I did. I used to draw everywhere. I would leave little traces of myself wherever I went, the way that I saw the world and the way that I wanted the world to see me in my little fairy tale fantasy that I lived in. I once drew on the white family room futon with a blue Crayola marker, little princesses and jewelry and gemstones. And I once superglued cardstock to the playroom wall, which was obviously just a castle off in the distance, clearly. And this is obviously still a habit that I still have, but now I paint in different ways, like I'm still Rapunzel, trapped in her tower with nothing to entertain her but her own imagination. But I realized that eventually, like Rapunzel, it was time for me to leave my tower and to bring my art to other places and to leave traces of myself in other areas of my life. So, with this being said, I chose to paint a mural on CBA's campus for my senior capstone project. The process leading up to the actual painting portion of this project was long and difficult and took a lot more time than I anticipated. I had to get everything approved by administration. I had to first send in 3 sketches of what I expected to paint on the wall, and I had to get the actual location of the mural approved by administration. And I had to locate all sorts of materials because I didn't want to have to buy anything for this project. I don't have that kind of budget. And the entire encapsulating theme of my project, I wanted to be the beauty of the Appalachian region where we live. Here in East Tennessee, we are so incredibly fortunate to be surrounded by such astonishing natural beauty everywhere we look, whether it's up in the mountains or down at your feet. And I used to look up at the mountains in such awe and amazement, like every day was a new day to create or experience something new. And this is the feeling that I wanted to have in my mural itself. But I realized that by living here for as long as I have, I've kind of lost that sense of childhood wonder and amazement because I've gotten so used to seeing the Smoky Mountains as a view whenever I look out of my car window. But I wanted to still encapsulate that sense of childhood imagination. And in addition to being a lover of art and painting, I'm also a lover of poetry. And per administration's request, I included a poem excerpt, and I wanted the poem to be by a local poet to kind of tie in that whole local beauty image. And I found this quote by James Agee, who was a Knoxvillian poet, and I found that it described my mural with such preciseness, which was such an amazing coincidence. And he has such a talent of being able to describe things in a childlike manner and with such magic and wonder behind them, which is something that I really admire and, again, tied into the meaning of my mural. Smoke and great shadows seemed to be sailing around on them, but he knew that must be clouds. After a while, he began to see the shapes of them clearly, great bronzy bulges that looked as if they were blown up tight like balloons, and solemn, deep scoops of shady blue that ran from the tops on down below the tops of the near hills, deeper than he could see. While I was working on this mural, I definitely existed in my creative element. You know, that little space in your head where you're just like, you can't stop working, or the creativity is flowing out of every pore in your body. But while I was in that element, it was also different, because whenever I had done a project like this, not nearly to this scale, but a project similar to it, I had been in the privacy of my own home or in an art class. But here, working on this mural, I was exposed, and everyone could see the progress of my mural and where I was exactly. And that, I'll say, it made me a little bit insecure, because I tend to be a perfectionist, especially in my art. And if I make mistakes, I don't want anyone to see them. And if I have to cover something up and try a different approach to something, I don't want people to have to see that. So by working on this mural, I had to really let go of those nitpicky and negative moments of myself and to stop criticizing my own creativity. And by doing that, I embraced the little Charlotte that I used to be, the one that just created art anywhere and everywhere for the sake of creating art and making everything look like it was in her little fairy tale world, and to bring back that childhood sense of myself. So, when I leave this school, I'm going to leave this mural behind, but I'll be leaving a little piece of myself, a little trace of who I am now and who I was when I was a child, to be left behind and remembered. And who I become next, and wherever I go, that will still be a piece of this mural, embedded in the brushstrokes. Thank you.
Grandpa, say something.
In that video right there was younger me and my grandpa. Now, if you know my grandpa, then you would know that he had dentures. And he would always leave his dentures in the most randomest places possible. On the table, in the bathroom, in the chair, where some occasions where me or my grandma almost even sat on them. And I just thought it was so fascinating and so cool that someone could take their teeth out whenever they wanted to. Come junior year, we were able to job shadow a job that we were possibly interested in going into in college or later on down the road. And I took this opportunity to go into like bones or teeth. So I decided to job shadow a radiologist tech up near Blount Memorial Hospital, since my grandpa gave me that passion to be interested in bones and, of course, his teeth. Come senior year, Capstone came around, and I decided to job shadow up at LMU and work up there on creating a 3D printed model of my own dentures. And this process definitely was not easy. It took a lot of time and a lot of pressure on deadlines, but thankfully I was able to create my own model. But the step that I'm going to show you first is the final step to creating these dentures. So this is a liquid resin, and this is the 3D printers that they use up at LMU. And at the bottom, there's like a little heater that heats up this liquid resin, and then the machine will then raise it, and then it'll print upward and then downward. There are multiple steps of getting a scan of your teeth, and one of them is an ultra-oral light scanner. And yes, this is me, and I was the first ever test subject that was used up at LMU with this new technology. Rather than sitting at the orthodontist waiting for that goop to solidify and where you're choking on it, there's this new technology that just does a 3D scan and plays a little happy tune to create something like this. And it allows dentists to do this quicker and more easier when getting a model. Another way that you could use is a CT scan, which does have radiation, unlike the light scan, which just takes pictures. Now, this is me getting my CT scan done, and this is me, where where you can see tissue, bones, nerves, and not only was this project for my passion that my grandpa gave me, it was also a self-discovery project where I learned that I have a deviated septum, my wisdom teeth are almost on my nerves, and I am prone to sleep apnea. Thanks, Dad. That is why there's a red line here. It's because I have a small airway. Another option that you can use when looking at your CT scan is just clicking to where you can only see bones. And this can help dentists see if you have an overbite or an underbite and where your mandible is placed. And they can see like the structure of your bone and all that little fun stuff. Now, like I said before, this was a passion project, and my grandpa, like I said, when I was younger, I would see him take his dentures in and out, spark the passion in me to go into something that has to do with bones and teeth. And this allowed me to successfully create my own 3D printed models of my teeth. And on this left side, you can see this is from the ultra-oral light scanner, which is no radiation. And you can see my palate, you can see my teeth, and then on the right side, you can see the CT scan model that was printed. You can see where my nerve endings are, and you can also see way back there where my wisdom teeth are. And a fun little fact, this is the first ever model to ever be printed at LMU, and I'm proud to say that it was my jaw. So I really enjoyed this project, and I'm super great that I was able to work with Dr. Mardini and create my own model, which I am going to show up here. Hopefully, my grandfather is smiling down upon me with or without his teeth. Thank you.
If you knew young Sam, you would always see him with the starting five of people who always helped him out with sports. First, you have my mom, who I would ask on average about 3 times a day if she could rebound for me as I shot basketball in the driveway. Next, you have my sister, Shelby, who always acted like she was super interested in playing basketball with me or really doing anything athletic with me, but she always left young Sam sad as she never actually fulfilled her promises. Next, you have my dad, who would always challenge me to one-on-one in the driveway or a race across the front lawn, even if he knew his athletic days were behind him. Fourth, you have my trainer, Lester, who I would spend hours with every single week learning to do what we all thought were the simpler things in basketball, like dribbling. And finally, my cousin Marcus, who I'd play basketball with at our house and tackle football at our grandparents' house. Clearly, young Sam is a team sport guy. He's not out running cross country alone or golf alone. He's always with someone playing sports together. If you can't tell, I value the teamwork and collaboration of sports and how they can build community. That's why for my capstone, I wanted to find a way to invite people of all different athletic backgrounds to participate in athletic games. Because if I've been able to experience a close-knit community through sports, I would want other people to have that opportunity as well. So I decided to host intramural sports tournaments for the CBA high school in hopes of not only growing the athletics here, but also to build a community through sports. In the CBA high school, there are two common games that are played every single day: ping pong and spike ball. Yes, these games do get competitive, and even if there are some arguments here and there, they always bring people close together. Ping pong is constantly played by the freshmen, and it is known as a sport that all the new freshmen play. Some of these freshmen play sports, while others don't, but regardless, it brings them closer together. However, ping pong isn't commonly played by the upperclassmen, but I knew if I could create an incentive, then I can invite people of all different backgrounds, upperclassmen, underclassmen, people who play sports, and people who don't play sports, to participate in my athletic games. That's where I came up with the simple yet effective method of bringing food, because everyone loves snacks, and awarding the winner a gift card of their choice. Now, if you ask people before they showed up why they signed up, they would more than likely either said A, because I asked them about 17 times, or B, because they wanted the gift card. However, the tournament was the exact goal of my capstone. It brought 22 people together of all different athletic backgrounds to create a competitive, fun, and welcoming environment. The next sport I held a tournament for required students to sign up in teams. Now, obviously, playing in teams of all different sizes brings people together. I know this from experience, as myself and 3 other senior boys in the beginning of the year started keeping track of how many spikeball games we played and how many each team has won. As we keep track, we laugh, we make jokes, and we occasionally get a little too loud for some teachers' likings. Sorry, Mr. Hussey. Although I'm currently on the losing side of these spikeball games, I can at least acknowledge the fact that they've brought us 4 senior boys extremely close. Outside of us senior boys, spikeball is played every single break and every single lunch, regardless of weather. So I knew it had to be a sport I held a tournament for. However, I wanted to make sure that people who don't play spikeball every day still felt welcomed. I wanted to prove the point that community through sports is not dependent upon skill level, and people of all different athletic backgrounds can form a close bond through these sports. There were a total of 13 teams of 2, all of which had different skill levels. Some played spikeball every chance they could, while others had never played spikeball a day in their life. Even as teams got eliminated, everyone stayed, everyone felt included, and everyone had a great time. The next sport I held a tournament for is a sport that's not often played here at CBA. As I was thinking about a third sport, I knew it needed to be something that wasn't extremely popular here to again reinforce the idea that sports of any kind can bring community together. So I chose cornhole as the third sport because I knew that it wasn't often played here at CBA. Despite its low popularity, it still brought 10 people together, again, all of which had different athletic backgrounds, to create a competitive, fun, and welcoming environment. As I look back at this tournament, it is apparent that no matter what sport it is, how it's played, or how much athletic talent it requires, it can bring people together. As I was completing these tournaments, it also became apparent to me how much background work needed to be done. What I initially thought were simple things like checking availability for facilities, seeing which days to avoid CBA sports practices and other CBA events, and advertising my tournaments were all a little more challenging than I initially anticipated. As well, these tournaments require me to make quick decisions, as there are multiple instances that people on teams were last-minute scratches, leaving their teammates without a partner. Even though in those moments I was stressed about if the tournament was going to work out the way I wanted and if everyone would feel included, everyone always had a great time, and it was always a competitive and fun environment. As I look back, I've known since I was young that sports bring a feeling of community. And through completing these tournaments, I still find that to be true. CBA highly values itself on community-building activities, and it is my hope that these tournaments can continue to happen and bring people together in the future. Even though my starting 5 has changed, my love for team sports hasn't. As I watched people of all different athletic backgrounds compete in my tournaments, it is apparent that my tournaments were fun, welcoming, competitive, and they ultimately did what I wanted them to do: bring people together through sports. Thank you.
When you think of a writer's workshop, what do you picture? An old wooden desk, books and papers stacked in a frivolous yet strategically placed way? Perhaps a potted succulent to breathe life into the space. Whatever you envision, it is likely not a Buc-ee's in Daytona, Florida. The summer before I came to CBA, I went to Florida with my friend Sophie. And 5 seconds after we stepped into the land of the famed beaver, I lost Sophie. In search of her, I wandered through rows and rows of seaside trinkets that customers with far too much money could buy as mementos of their vacation. Being there made me feel like I was already at the beach, basking in the waves and the sunshine. That's when it dawned on me. How can I make this drive more bearable? Start writing a story about pirates. I decided on a plot where a crown princess gets kidnapped by a fearsome pirate captain as a method of distracting myself from the long drive ahead. Back then, I had no idea it would blossom into an allegory for classism and imperialism. It was just a fun little story to pass the time. But I found soon that I couldn't get it off my mind. Even when I started at CBA, I wasn't able to get it off my mind. I was the new kid, and with that brought a lot of stress and confusion. So what do I do in an uncomfortable situation? I start writing. I pulled up the then 20-page Google Doc and wrote whenever I had the chance. It was a method of distracting myself, yet again, from all the confusion that I was facing being the new kid. But then another new kid distracted me. She asked me about my story, and I opened up to her. And if you know me at all, you know that talking about my stories is quite a difficult undertaking for me. But something about her inquisitive nature just made me want to open up about it all. She would then stay on FaceTime calls with me late at night and discuss my latest chapters. Her name was Finley, and she became my first friend at CBA. Towards the end of sophomore year, my theater teacher, Miss Baldwin, allowed us to write scenes for our theater class to act for family gathering. I decided that this would be the time that I would debut what I had wrote, or the tiny snippet of it, for our family gathering presentation. I was so nervous about it because it was the first time I'd ever done anything of the sort, but it ended up being one of the most fulfilling experiences of my high school career. And it went on to inspire me to join theater and be a part of our first fall play in my senior year as assistant director. When senior year came along, it seemed like a no-brainer that I should continue what I had started for Capstone. But I found that my motivation and passion slowly dwindled the more that time went along. Obstacles began to appear between me and my favorite thing in the world, writing. College applications, play practice, essays, college tours, a long battle with COVID, AP environmental science, anxiety, writer's block. All of these became roadblocks in between me and my story. I became more and more dissatisfied with what I wrote. Rewrites became frequent, ideas were scrapped. It always felt like I was moving one step forward and 3 steps back. I had to remind myself that this wasn't for a grade or a weekly quota. This was for me. This was my story and my characters that I wanted to share with the world. As I end my senior year, I look back on how much of myself has been developed from my time here at CBA. I began the first chapter of my story as a new CBA student, and I will finish the last as a CBA alum. Through this experience, I have gained so many people in my life that I can truly share my stories with.
And while I may not have completed my book, I hope that I can tell my story to them and they will listen and give me advice for the future. Whenever I drive to my father's house, I pass by a Buc-ee's. It wasn't there when I started writing my story, but now it is up and running. And while I know that I willingly will never step foot in a Buc-ee's again, every time I drive past it is a reminder of the passion project that I love so dearly. To conclude my presentation, I'd like to read an excerpt that I wrote for my story. Antoinette screamed. She couldn't stop screaming. There was no one to hear her. A prison cell of her own had surrounded her, forcing her to remember the suffering she inflicted upon every single one of her so-called friends. They would never forgive her. How could they forgive such a villain? She was cruel. She was unforgiving. She was everything they knew she was from the beginning. She just didn't know it herself. Thank you.
How many of you in the room know how to drive a manual car? Those of you with your hands raised, I want you to close your eyes and imagine your first time driving a manual car. I bet you remember your first time stalling out, because I sure do remember mine. And I remember my junior year, I wanted to learn how to drive a manual car for my Capstone project. In July of 2023, I came across a 1994 S10 Blazer with a 5-speed manual transmission in it. On a sunny Sunday afternoon, me and my dad went to go look at it. Now, it was definitely rough and needed a lot of work, but me and my dad saw a lot of potential in it. So I bought it for $1,800, and I was following my dad, and I was thinking the whole time, oh my gosh, I just bought a car, and oh my gosh, I gotta figure out how to drive it. So after owning the car for about a week, I was very eager and anxious to learn how to drive it. So I was storing the car at my Meemaw's house, and one day after school, I decided to go drive it. And I couldn't even get it out of the garage. So, of course, I went back to my dad and asked for some advice. And the next day, I took his advice, and I was at least able to get it out of the garage. And once I started driving it and getting comfortable with it, it was time to learn how to fix it. So first, I started doing smaller jobs. So as you can see here, we went to a bunch of junkyards like Pull Apart in Knoxville, and I found they had a couple S10 pickup trucks there, and I was able to find a parking brake release cable. And a parking brake release cable is very important, especially in a manual car, because it is very important to set and release the parking brake in a manual vehicle. Next, what I did is I drained all of the coolant in the system because it was very yucky and muddy and watery, and the secondary reservoir for the coolant system had a bunch of mud and junk inside of it. And I also replaced the headlights to LEDs because the 30-year-old halogen headlights were just not working anymore. And it is very scary to drive at night with 30-year-old halogen headlights. So I decided to replace them with really bright LEDs. And then lastly, one of the last things I did was I made grass floor mats. I've seen a couple people do this in their vehicles and thought I could give it a try. And I think it turned out absolutely wonderful, and it also hid 30-year-old stains. On a intermediate level of projects I did, I replaced the power steering fluid and a power steering line because the line was very brittle and it cracked and it was leaking really bad. And as you can see here, the power steering fluid looks very brownish and it smelled horribly, and it just needed to be replaced because it was old. And I also replaced the heater core, one, because it's very important to have heat in the wintertime, and two, it started leaking coolant into the floorboard, which is really not good at all. And in order to replace the heater core, you have to pull out half the dash, and to make it easier on yourself, you also have to take the seat out so you can get to it easier. And the most challenging thing that I did on the Blazer was replace the entire front end. This consisted of upper and lower ball joints, upper control arms, CV axles, shocks, and tie rod ends, the whole 9 yards. And while that was already enough of a challenge for me, I also had to get this done 3 days before traveling for Christmas. And so I spent a lot of my time watching YouTube videos and running back and forth from the parts store to get extra parts. And after about 2 days, I finally got the right side done, with 1 day left to get the left side done. But I was very confident that I could get the left side done because I knew how the right side went. And around 11:30 p.m. on December 23rd, I was able to get the left side done. And as you can see here at the top, this is the difference between a 30-year-old shock and a brand new shock. And this is the old CV axle, and at the top you can see that the boot has completely just ripped off the CV axle, making it not functional at all. And then this last picture up here is the entire right side taken off. And this is the before and after picture. As you can see, the tires leaning more in like this, and afterwards, after I got the alignment done, it's standing straight up. And now I would like to show you a video of me driving the Blazer. Now, it might look a little rough still, but the goal was for it to not be perfect. Yes, it still has rust. Yes, it has 317,000 miles on it. And as you can see here, it looks like I'm only going from first to second, but that's just how close the gearing is, and that's why it took me so long to figure out how to drive. But overall, if I ever get into a situation where I need to drive a manual car, I will be confident enough to hop in it without any hesitation at all. And if I do get into a situation where I need to drive a manual car, I will always think back to my first time driving the Blazer. Thank you.
So when I was about 4 years old, I watched that clip right there, and I thought to myself, I'm going to make that machine. I'm going to be able to sled down the backyard on some snow that I made. And so I went to my dad and I said, let's go get some cardboard and some duct tape and let's make something. And by the time we were done, it looked great. It looked just like I thought it should. My only problem with it was it didn't actually work. And that was something that really bothered me. And to all of you, that might seem like such a foolish thing to be upset about, but I always had these really big dreams. I always thought that I should be able to do these things that I shouldn't necessarily have the capabilities of achieving. And that's not something that's necessarily changed as I've gotten older. So about the time we started picking out our capstone projects, my dad approached me about taking over the sales and marketing for a company called Muscle Ropes. So Muscle Ropes, for those of you who don't know, is a battle rope company that focuses on making premium battle ropes. And battle ropes are a cardiovascular exercise that are commonly found in CrossFit gyms and professional trainer gyms. So when he told me that, I was like, oh, that sounds great. I'm going to do a bunch of sales, I'm going to do a bunch of marketing work, and I'm going to redo the whole website because I don't like how it looks. And on top of all that, I want to try and go for a 10% overall increase in my revenue. So I had a big dream. This was the website I started with. I didn't like how it looked. It looked old. It was pretty clunky. It was kind of hard to navigate around, and it really didn't look inviting to me. So I took inspiration from websites like Rolex and Red Bull, who I really liked the look of their websites. They had their product front and center as soon as you got to the webpage, and you had this little bit of text right there in the middle. They kind of told you what the product was, and you could scroll down through and you could get a little bit more information on other products in their catalog or that product specifically. So this was something I adapted into my website whenever I first made it. So I have my product front and center and a little bit of text right there that says kind of what we're about, and then you can scroll down and you can get more information on our other things in our catalog. While I was doing this, I also went through and added pop-ups throughout the website that would kind of encourage you to add some other things into your shopping cart while you were purchasing stuff, just because it matched what you were buying, and that further increased what I was gonna make because you were gonna add some more stuff into your shopping cart. After I worked on the website, I moved into doing sales. Now, sales was something I thought I would enjoy a lot and I'd do pretty successful with. I thought, I'm just gonna call some people and they're gonna answer the phone and I'm gonna say, hey, you should buy this battle rope. And they'll say, oh, sure, I'll buy that battle rope. And what really ended up happening was I would call someone and the phone would just kind of keep ringing until no one answered. And it was pretty discouraging at first, but after about 2 months of doing that and not much really going well for me, I thought, what if I could get someone to do that for me? So I reached out to Power Systems. Power Systems is a local company in Knoxville that does fitness equipment, and they currently sell a battle rope. They have a whole team of salespeople, but their battle rope isn't really good. It tends to break, and they have to do a lot of replacements and a lot of warranty claims on these ropes. Our rope doesn't break. So I reached out to them and said, what if I was the supplier for your rope? You wouldn't have to worry about doing all the replacements on your ropes, and I wouldn't have to worry about doing all this sales work that I'm having to do right now. So I reached out to them, and we talked through that a little bit. The next thing I worked on was the marketing. Marketing, again, was something I kind of thought I would do pretty good with, but in reality, I didn't do too well with. I thought, I'm just gonna put some pictures up and I'm gonna put some text to the pictures and it's gonna look great. But it was really a lot harder than that. You have to really try and work with pairing the pictures well with the text, and I wasn't really good with that because I'm not a really artsy person. So what I ended up using it for was I would just try and match what we were doing with sales and actually with discounts on the website and try to pair that with some promotional images and try to promote extra sales through people going to seeing our social channels. So I did all this work and I did all this stuff, and you're probably wondering, how well did that actually go for you? How much of that actually went the way you wanted it to go? Well, I finished the website, and I have a much better website now and a far more functional looking website now that I pay about half the price for that I did when we started. On top of that, I have 2 brand deals currently in progress, first of which being with Power Systems. Power Systems has our product currently under review with their sales team to be the potential new supplier for their battle ropes. The second one being John Brookfield. John Brookfield is the inventor of the battle rope exercise, and he contacted us over Christmas break and discussed with us possibly being the supplier for anyone he finds needs new battle ropes when he goes out and launches his next fitness program later this month. So we discussed on a price with that, and that rolls out later this month. So I also really wanted that 10% overall increase in revenue. Instead, I ended up with a 21% increase in overall revenue. So while my dreams certainly haven't gotten any smaller, I sure have gotten a lot better at achieving them. Thank you.
Every year within the United States since 2016, 10,000 homicidal cases of gun violence have been prominent and have become the norm. As one would assume, states with little to no legislation regarding gun control have higher rates of gun violence. You don't even need a permit in the state of Tennessee to own a firearm, but I just care too much. 91% of victims of rape and sexual assault identify as female, on top of the fact that several state legislatures, particularly here in the South, are banning access to contraceptives like birth control and abortion, making safe women's health care a scarcity. As of 2023, the oil and gas production industry came to a total revenue of $4.3 trillion, making it one of the largest industries within the world. All of that said, exploration and production account for nearly 90% of all global carbon dioxide emissions, therefore worsening the current climate crisis that we experience today. But I just care too much. In retrospect, is there really such a thing as caring too much? In my opinion, there isn't. But there is such a thing as caring too little, and too many people do. 2 important things happened to me as a second grader.
From paging on the House floor in Nashville to participating in my father's state representative campaign, the political field has been in my life since before I even knew what it was. Around the same time, a woman working on my father's campaign became my babysitter. My interest in artistic expression blossomed when she first taught me how to draw Scooby-Doo, as can be seen by a few of my recent pieces here. From that point on, my interest in both social action and artistic expression became integral parts of my life. More recently, I've deepened my understanding of political engagement by getting involved in State Representative Gloria Johnson's midterms campaign. My experience with canvassing, phone banking, and social media management gave me a deeper insight into how important education around these issues actually is. Gloria advocates for the same issues that I've always held passionately close: the protection of queer people, racial and gender equality, quality education with fair teacher pay, environmental prioritization, closing the wealth gap, etc. These are some of the debates that I wanted to include in my capstone project. However, I just didn't know how. So, during this brainstorming process, I asked myself 2 questions. 1, how do we get our youth to contribute to conversations about our world's largest humanitarian issues? And 2, what actually engages people at a mass level? I had the answer to both: emotion. Anger, fear, sadness, empathy. All of these are qualities that are incited mainly through artistic media, therefore inciting long-term change. So I decided to tie artistic expression with political engagement and education. I spent the last 6 months on a 5-piece portfolio filled with different media like graphite, ink, collage work, and oil paint. During this process, I didn't really know where to start. I didn't really know what each painting or piece should surround, so I just started by assigning each piece to some of the most common political debates within the US that I am passionate about. During this process, I didn't really know where to start with my inspiration. So during art block and time management, I resorted to things like literary symbolism and media iconography. For example, I referred to Pink Floyd's Empty Spaces music video as inspiration for one of my pieces standing here with me. I used the inspiration of using flowers to represent female anatomy. During this process, I also was having a bit of a hard time with outlining, so I created my own reference photos using an app called Procreate. I also referred to stock images just to get the general idea of things like fingers and bodily positions and flowers and, things that I can't exactly think of off the top of my head. This is how something like this, and this is a little weird, by the way, so be prepared, turned into a piece like this. I have a different story like this for each one of my pieces. This is my proudest piece of work as it represents my interpretation of the war on women in the post-media world. This is also my most difficult product to make, as I started it in September and didn't finish it until last week. Unfortunately, this was kind of the case for the majority of my pieces. My original outline consisted of starting and finishing one piece each month all the way up until the month of January, with August reserved for outlining. However, that was not the case. Instead, I would start a piece each month and then, unfortunately, abandon it for another out of boredom or art block. I didn't realize how much time one piece could swallow. So, despite my difficulties with finishing each piece, I still was able to finalize my visions and decisions throughout the month of February. My initial goal with this project was to figure out a way to engage efficiently, future voters, and do it in a way that I also happen to be passionate about. At the beginning of this presentation, when I was trying to start the outline for it, I was a bit fearful. I was a bit fearful over what I would be able to show. Some of my art pieces could be interpreted as too vulgar or crude for the general audience, which ironically is exactly the reason why I made this portfolio the way that I did. Exposing the public to the disturbing aspects of our country is the first step in inciting change, as some of my favorite artists like Pablo Picasso, Yoko Ono, and Francisco Goya intended with their work. My next step with my finalized portfolio is to follow in their footsteps by sharing my work with others. I've already started this process by presenting one of my pieces at a Blount County Democratic headquarters meeting. The sheer joy and curiosity and awe that came from the audience is what gave this portfolio a purpose. I also have a confirmed show at a studio called Broadway Studios and Gallery, so I encourage all to go see it. Political instrumentalism is the idea that anything can be used as an instrument to change our world. For me, that instrument is my art. I encourage all to be further educated in what instruments they can use to change the world, even this city, by getting in contact with representatives, supporting local artists, voting in this coming election, and most importantly, learning how to care too much. Thank you.
Okay, I know it's really late, but I don't think my mom would mind too much if I wrote my journal for just a little bit longer. March 7th, 2012. Dear Diary, today, my little brother spilled apple juice all over the floor, and it took forever to clean up. Then, I decided to, do you hear that? I think she's coming. XOXO, Chloe. I've always loved to journal. Whenever something good, bad, or in between happens in my life, I've always turned to two things, prayer and journaling, both of which have brought me peace, clarity, and understanding. When it was time to choose a capstone project, I was using that journal like there was no tomorrow. Idea after idea, nothing felt right. Nothing felt like it would have a lasting impact on the world around me. So I did what I normally do. You guessed it. I prayed and journaled about my project, which led me to reflect, specifically on the life lessons I had learned up to this point in my senior year. The main one being, whenever one door closes, another one opens, and there's always a greater plan on the other side. From a fairly young age, I realized that without learning to trust the Lord's plan for my life, my world would be full of anxious thoughts and self-doubt, which led me to realize and start pursuing my passion, helping other women grow in their relationship with God. So, as I continued to think about my capstone and what this project would be, I finally understood. I was going to design a journal with original prompts to help other women not only improve their journaling habits, but to help them dig deeper and find confidence in a relationship with God. So I did exactly that. I began by searching for faith-based journals already on the market in hopes of creating a unique one of my own. I knew this wasn't going to be perfect as it was my first project, but I was willing to put in as much effort as I could to make it the best it could be. I started writing prompts about topics I found in my daily devotionals and ended up with 52 for the 52 weeks of the year. The goal being to focus on one prompt per week in hopes of reflecting and taking action the entire week. I wrote about topics I felt were especially relevant in today's society, such as self-image, confidence, anxiety, joy, and tying them all together. I wrote about topics and things I wish I could have told my younger self, and things I wish other women knew about themselves. Although I strengthened my own relationship with God through this process, I also learned more about technical skills. I used Canva to design templates and improved my own designing skills, as well as improved my editing and formatting skills. I had to overcome obstacles, though, one being almost having to completely redesign every page of the journal because of a minor sizing mistake. Thanks for your help on that one, Mr. Nelson. Through this process, I learned more about problem solving and perseverance. Both are skills I will bring with me to a college setting and eventually to a professional setting. Not to mention the intimidating yet feasible task of Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing. My next obstacle was to choose a cover image for my journal. Now, I hate to break it to you, but people actually do judge a book by its cover, so I had to make sure this was visually appealing and welcoming to the journalist. I originally thought I wanted the title of my journal to be something like Flourish or Bloom, but quickly realized there were too many journals out there with the same name. But I still wanted to incorporate the symbolism of flourishing and blooming. So, what not else but flowers? Wildflowers specifically. If you know me at all, you know I absolutely adore flowers, and there's this one special saying I've held on to for a long time. It goes like this: in a world full of roses, she is a wildflower. To me, this not only symbolizes the uniqueness, the beauty of uniqueness, but as Christians, how we are set apart from the rest of the world. I ended up with a simple cover that showcases the beauty and grace of wildflowers. Next, the biggest obstacle of them all, the title. This is something I'd been thinking about since I began the project and was the one thing that was holding me back from my upcoming deadline of February to have my journal completed and published. My entire life, throughout my personal struggles, one thing has helped me to persevere: my relationship with God. And I wanted the title to reflect this. Come January, this one word kept entering my mind repeatedly. That word was abide. So I decided to dig deeper into the meaning and did what any other 17-year-old would do. I Googled it. I found that abide means to endure without yielding. I then took it a step further and looked at it through a biblical perspective and found this: abide, letting Christ's word dwell in us, reform our desires, and direct our wills. I decided it was the perfect title for my journal, and the title is now Abide in Him. In the end, I created a product I'm incredibly proud of and got it published on Amazon. I mean, you could buy it right now if you wanted to, but this is more than just a journal to me. This is a tool I hope to use to inspire other women across the nation and eventually across the world to dig deeper into their faith and realize that they don't have to live in a world full of anxious thoughts and self-doubt, that they can find confidence in the one who created them. And thinking back to that little girl who had her flashlight and journal under her pillow, little did she know the vessel she would be on the other side of her bedroom door to help others abide in Him. Thank you.
Don't know me, my name is Catalina Searle, and I teach middle and high school Spanish, specifically 6th, 7th, and 9th grade. But I also had the honor of co-teaching the Capstone class. It is my first year here at CBA, and if I had not been assigned to teach this class, I probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to really get to know this wonderful group of students. I have truly enjoyed getting to know each of them and learning so much about them through our weekly meetings. They are all so bright, and I have loved seeing them work so hard in something that they are passionate about. I can honestly say that they are going to thrive as they leave for their next adventures, and they will always hold a special place in my heart as my first class of seniors here at CBA. They have shown me how amazing it is to be a graduate of Clayton-Bradley Academy, and I couldn't be more proud. So here's the second half of Amazing Presentations. Thank you.
Well, I guess it's not the biggest surprise that what I have on stage today is something I built. As far back as I can remember, I've been building all sorts of things. And it all started with something most of you are probably familiar with: Legos. I've been using Legos as my engineering medium for most of my childhood, and they've helped me develop my creativity and problem-solving skills. As I've gotten older, however, Legos have become much more complex forms of expression. Now I'm standing on stage today with my latest brainchild, an electric go-kart built completely from scratch. I chose this project as my senior capstone, but this machine's journey started much further back, and so did its struggles. December of 2022. As midterms were rolling in and schedules were about to change my junior year, I made a decision that would change the course of my high school career. I sat down with Dr. Lucas and then the administration to set up a double engineering block to build a go-kart from scratch. Dr. Lucas only had one rule for this undertaking. It had to be electric. Up to this point, I had absolutely zero experience in electronics, and I've been planning on using a combustion engine, something I was far more familiar with. January to May of 2023. Though I have a passion for building and want to pursue a career in engineering, I had never attempted a project of this scale, one with such a large learning curve. I had assembled a team of 2 of my classmates to complete this kart over the semester. But unfortunately, none of us had ever attempted anything near this, and so, like the kart, we had to start from scratch. With little experience, I had to teach myself everything I needed to know to complete the project. All I had to start with was my basic knowledge of mechanics from working on my cars, and of course, my experience with Legos. During that double block my junior year, I completed the initial kart, or so I thought. At the very end of my timeline, I had a major motor malfunction that turned a go-kart that could go nearly 25 miles an hour into a useless pile of junk in my basement. As it sat there over summer, I realized I couldn't just let it collect dust. August to October of 2023. Since the original project was completely funded by my personal bank account, I was struggling to find a way to pursue it further. Luckily, Dr. Lucas pushed me to continue and assured me that outsourcing funding for a senior capstone project would work. It was much harder than it sounded. I spent a total of 3 to 4 months contacting companies, getting rejected, and being ghosted. It seemed like no companies related to my project wanted to sponsor something so ambitious and costly. I also had several misunderstandings about how this was a group-funded budget, where possible sponsors would instantly reject me, assuming I was asking them for the entire $4,000. The most money I even got from a large company was a 5% discount code from my motor manufacturer. And of course, that didn't even cover taxes. December of 2023. After spending a month and a half designing my motor mounts, I had finally gotten them professionally welded and was prepared for testing. Unfortunately, during that initial testing, I was unknowingly bending my mounts apart and loosening my drive chain to a point of failure. As winter break came, I was determined to improve my design and complete my project when the drive chain popped completely off the motor. To make matters worse, when I removed the motor to assess the damages, I found my mounts being completely crushed by the sheer torque of the motor. I was desperate for a fix, and so I asked my grandfather, a mechanic himself and a big inspiration of mine. And, well, I ended up needing to completely scrap my design and start over, even though I was planning on finishing the kart before the break was over, a deadline that was less than 3 weeks away. I have had all of these problems, and all of these setbacks threw me months behind schedule during both of these build series, and yet my kart is standing here on stage today. But that's not the only new thing on stage. I'm standing up here, and I've learned a lesson from each of these issues, and the countless others I don't even have time to mention. From the start of this project, when Dr. Lucas told me to make my dream kart electric, I had to learn to adapt my plans and follow new and interesting ideas. Now, my eyes are open to changing plans if others feel it's not the best route or if I'm going down the wrong path. Back last January, I hadn't started an engineering project for anything, and now I've participated in 2 intensive build series to create a 90-horsepower death machine from scratch. I know how to brainstorm, plan it on a whiteboard, and make countless mocks of all different shapes, sizes, and materials before making the slightest cut into metal. Even from starting my capstone, I've improved myself. At the beginning of this journey, money was not my top priority. Now I know better. Find your money before you become obsessed with a project. You have to work for money. Money does not just appear when you need to finish a project. And of course, everyone is going to be skeptical to donate to something they don't think is possible. Lastly, and most importantly, I've learned the value of asking for help and overcoming a restart. When I started my capstone, I was determined to complete everything myself, no matter how complicated the task. In reality, I was just a 17-year-old who had no idea what they just signed themselves up for. Look up to the people who can help you. It's always better to have a completed project with more experience than a failure because you couldn't swallow your pride and ask for help. I can't thank my grandfather enough for his help over winter break, and I don't know if I'd be driving this go-kart up on stage without him. It's been a journey, and I'm learning the engineering process, or at least I've started to, and I'm one step closer to realizing my dreams of being an engineer. I took a risk and started something that the school has never seen before, knowing that the infrastructure here wasn't prepared for a project of this size. I've had problems. I've even blown up a couple transmissions, but my design is sitting on 4 wheels today because I persevered through. The goal of this project was to complete my dream go-kart, but I ended up doing much more than that. I rebuilt myself. I learned many physical skills, but I also learned life lessons that will not only take me through college, but into my engineering career. I've always been a builder, but this project has given me the resources to pursue newer and more complicated projects in the future. Thank you.
My earliest memory is the blinding lights of a hospital room, the blank white walls and cold tile floors, and a large metal box on wheels plastered with all sorts of colors and cords connected to a little girl with a gold ribbon pinned to her nightgown. It's ironic, really. Gold is usually associated with prosperity and wealth, but that couldn't be further from the truth for that little girl. For that little girl, it meant one thing: cancer. In the fall of 2009, my cousin Lydia was diagnosed with cancer, and our whole worlds were turned upside down. She started coming over to my house less and less, and when I would see her, she always seemed very upset. Sometimes I'd try to cheer her up with songs or stories, but it seems like no matter what I did, nothing would cheer her up. That was until one day Lydia made a new friend, a golden cocker spaniel named Sophia. Sophia came into her hospital room and her face lit up with joy. I heard her talk more in that one session than I'd heard her talk in weeks. With the help of Sophia, Lydia was on the road to recovery, and in the spring of 2010, Lydia was officially cancer-free. After her recovery, Lydia helped me pick out my first ever dog, Lexi. Lexi and I grew up together, and I considered her more as a sister than my pet, to be honest. We got my other dog, Willow, not long after Lexi was diagnosed with a heart condition, which ultimately took her life right before her 10th birthday. It broke my family, especially my dad, who I saw cry for the first time in my entire life. Sometimes we'd sit in the living room and share pictures and stories of Lexi, and I remember one time in particular, Willow had come and sat in the middle of all of us and started rolling around like a worm. It made me forget about Lexi for a moment, and I started laughing for the first time in what felt like forever. And in that moment, I was reminded of that dog who helped Lydia all those years ago. After doing a little research, I found that Sophia came from an organization called Habit, a group of volunteers offering animal therapy to those who need it in Tennessee. The more I looked into it, the more interested I was in joining Habit. But it proved to be more difficult than I thought. I was giving the contact information of a woman working with Habit, and she provided a video to me that explained all the qualities needed of a dog working in their program. The ability to sit and stay, healing, no jumping or barking at visitors during visitations, and self-control when it came to things like food, toys, and other temptations. I knew Willow could sit and stay and heal, but she struggled with containing her excitement when meeting with new people. So I devised a training plan. For 1 hour every day, I would focus on a different aspect of something she struggled with. I started taking her to group classes and walking with her every day. And over time, I started seeing progress, bit by bit. It amazed me how the dog, who once couldn't even sit still for 30 seconds, can now sit still for up to 30 minutes with no problems. I started taking her on more and more adventures, exposing her to more and more new things, until finally I thought she was ready for her evaluation. However, I made a mistake, and during my training with her, I always had my dad with me. I've always struggled with being soft-spoken, So normally, whenever she would get out of control, it would be him who would correct her. And on the day of the evaluation, I was nervous not having him there with me, which in turn made Willow nervous. During the evaluation, she was constantly licking her lips, and she just seemed tense overall. And at one point, a man unexpectedly came around the corner, and she barked at him. And that was the moment I realized just how unprepared I was. See, you could have the most well-trained dog in the world, but if you can't communicate what you want from them, their training means nothing. What I really needed to work on was myself. So I devised a new training plan, this time focusing on my tone and my body language when working with her. And I started seeing progress again, bit by bit. We still have a lot of work to do, mostly on my end, but I'm so proud of the progress we've already made, and I look forward to where we're going to be in the future. I've learned a lot through this process, but if I had to share just one of the lessons that I've learned with all of you, it would be this. Don't be afraid to reach out to the people or animals around you for help. There's so many amazing organizations out there, like Habit, who are willing to provide you with the support you need, so please utilize them. Lydia is now a freshman in college, working towards getting her bachelor's degree. I'll be in college in a few months, and I hope to continue working with Willow when I'm there. Until the day comes that all of our hard work finally pays off. The day Willow can make a little girl smile again, just like Lydia. Thank you.
Before I begin, I want to ask you all a question. And yes, there is a right and wrong answer. I have this presentation to give, right? But should I just go home? Or should I actually stay and present? Raise your hand if you think the first one. Now raise your hand if you think the second one. All right, so it seems like more of you chose the second one, which was the correct option, by the way. But let's pretend that I did actually just go home, walked off this stage, got in my car, and just drove away. What would happen? Well, for starters, I don't think the teachers that are here would actually let me leave. This is a pretty important project. And for another thing, at the very least, I'd probably get a bad grade on this project. But as you can see, there are consequences that come from our actions and from our choices that we make. That is the theme of my presentation today. What would you do? In life, we are given many choices, and many of them can lead to bad consequences. And I know that there are many adults that struggle to make the good choices sometimes. But if we can teach children at a young age to learn what the right decisions are, to make those right decisions, and also consider the consequences that can come from their actions, we can help for future generations to not make bad decisions like some past generations. But how do we do that? Well, I started off with how did I learn when I was younger? When I was younger, and even still now, I was a very visual learner, and I learned through stories. So I enjoyed shows like Word Girl, Odd Squad, Sid the Science Kid, VeggieTales, and of course, Dora the Explorer. These shows, I only realized later on in life, actually taught me important skills such as vocabulary, math, science, Bible stories, language, and also sharing and cooperation. So, I decided that I would make a series of videos that would teach kids important skills, and I decided on 5 topics. Lying and honesty, conflict resolution, or what I called getting things back, stealing, bullying, and collaboration. With these 5 topics, I then thought, how do I make sure that kids are actually retaining the knowledge I'm trying to give them? Well, what if I made the videos interactive? And I remembered another thing that I loved when I was younger, choose your own adventure books, where you can read about a scenario and characters, and then you get to choose what happens to these characters. And you get to read ahead in the book and find out how your choices affected the characters in the book. So, I decided that I would add that to my project. I came up with a list of 7 scenarios. And each of these scenarios have a total of about 3 videos with the main scenario and then the choices afterward, totaling to about 21 videos in total that I had to make. So then my next thought was, well, where do I get kids to actually test these videos out on to make sure they actually work? And my first thought was the school that I interned at last year during my junior year and the counselor that I interned with. Her name is Miss Moore at Middle Settlements Elementary School. And so I contacted Ms. Moore, and she loved my idea. So of course, we got to have our first meeting with the kids, and the kids actually came up with a list of guidelines that they would follow in every meeting. Ms. Moore and I knew that with the kids deciding on these 5 guidelines, that they would make sure that they were actually following them, rather than if Ms. Moore and I had just given them a list of rules to follow at every meeting. And then they got to watch their first video. And I was extremely nervous, because I was ready with a list of questions just in case the kids didn't want to talk about my videos, or in case they just didn't find them interesting. When the exact opposite happened. The kids were so excited to talk about my videos, and they immediately had so many questions and immediately started comparing what happens in these videos to what happens in their everyday lives. For example, in the video of the vase, the students compared what Mona says here to her brothers to something their parents might tell their older or younger siblings. And I love that, because that's exactly what I was expecting. And then in the video Broken, the kids immediately sympathized with Ben whenever Joey got a toy and he didn't, and they considered it unfair. And I loved that they did this. At every meeting, they had more and more questions, and they came up with more and more scenarios and what ifs. And one specific question they had was in the video My Toy, there is Ben and Alex. Alex takes Ben's toy, and the viewer is given the option of having Ben hit Alex or go and tell the teacher. If you choose the hit option, there's a background character that runs to get the teacher. And the students, upon seeing this, immediately pegged this girl as a tattletale. And they were upset at her for getting the teacher, even though Alex was hurt. Miss Moore and I then got the opportunity to explain to the kids that no, she's not being a tattletale, because someone was getting hurt. If you or someone else is getting hurt, and you or someone else has to go get a teacher, that's not being a tattletale, that's helping your friend. And that was something I had never considered upon making that video. I hadn't considered, well, this girl's being a tattletale, because that's not something that I care about as a high school senior. But as elementary school children and students, that is something they care about. They care about, well, what if I'm pegged as a tattletale? I can't go tell the teacher that someone did this. And that was really interesting to me. And then the kids came up with what if scenarios. What if that was actually Alex's toy before it was Ben's and he was just getting it back? Well, what if Frederick returned Rosie's toy tomorrow, so it didn't technically count as stealing? What if Mona got Ben a new toy, just like for Joey, so he wasn't jealous anymore? All of these scenarios caused me even to think about the world that I'd created with these characters and the scenarios that I'd made, and to think deeply about this whole project. So not only did the kids learn something, but I learned something as well. And then something really impactful happened for me. Miss Moore, upon our last meeting in December, asked the kids, well, what can other kids learn from these videos? And the students answered, other kids can learn patience. They can learn to help others. They can learn cooperation, and they can learn that it's okay to ask for help. And that's exactly what I was hoping for with these videos, is that kids would get to actually learn from them. And so at the beginning of this project, I titled it, What Would You Do? But I feel like another title that suits it really well, What Should You Do? Thank you.
I have horrible news. We are under attack. There is a zombie apocalypse going on right now outside. And I need you all to just remain in your seats and stay calm. And listen to my presentation. As you may be able to tell, I've been told many times that I have a wild imagination. Here's some artwork from my childhood to prove it. Here is a karate cat. Here is a mouse becoming friends with an elephant. You can't see it, but it's there. I like to do this a lot with my different scenarios. I've had a fish and a shark become friends. You'll see that later too. And then here's Clifford, a familiar face, swimming in an acid lake to save the purple poodle. Academic success for me was paramount, but I tend to lean creative. I tend to lean artistic. I am first an artist. Here are some of my works. I want to positively impact the world around me through my art. But how could I use my creativity in the digital world? For my capstone project, I wanted to use my artistic skills digitally by creating an animation, because a picture is worth 1,000 words, but a well-done animation is worth 1,000,000 clicks. For this process, I had to first learn how to draw digitally. So I downloaded the app Procreate. This was a bit of a challenge to learn. As an in-person artist, for some reason, drawing with a pencil and paper makes so much sense to me. But when it came to using this app that has so many different tools and stuff, it became confusing. And I had to relearn how to do color, how to do shapes. I also have a realism style in real life. So when I was doing it digitally, I had to do it more cartoonish because for me, that would be easier to animate. It was like learning art all over again. The next step of my process was learning how to animate. I had to take lots of things into consideration. I watched over 60 tutorials. And if you're thinking about like how a rhino would walk versus a rabbit, that's something that really helped me grasp how animation weight works. Because if you're moving a rhino, you would probably make the ground thud next to it. But if you're moving a rabbit, it would probably make like barely little grass pieces move. So I learned about that. And then I had to learn through CapCut. Now, I used to have an editing account on TikTok, so I had pre-experience with CapCut. And the main use for CapCut for me was picking the sound and the music that was going to be going in the background of my animation, and also just the focal points. It's something that I learned that more professional animations or films will do, where they will kind of replicate how an eye would watch things and blur the background to keep everyone, like the viewer, knowing where they're supposed to focus. So I tried to replicate that through my CapCut app. Now, for my actual storyline, I've always been imagining for all my 18 years, so when it came to come up with an idea for a story, this kind of came naturally for me. Like I said, I've had a shark and a fish story going on in my head for a while. So I chose to use that story, but instead it's about a boy who copes through things with his imagination. And to do this, he's getting bullied in school, so he imagines himself as a fish and his bully as the shark. And it helps him find a solution through it. And so, here's a fish. This took me 20 hours to do. This was the first thing I animated and drew, and this was me putting all those skills I learned together. It took a good bit of time. So that was my first thing that really gave me my okay, I can continue and I can do this. And so here's just a little snippet of the beginning of my animation.
Played pretend between the trees and fed my house gas sparking leaves and laughed.
And I did cut it off so that we wouldn't take up too much time. But, okay. So I'm really proud of all that I've learned through this entire capstone process. And I think I've learned skills how to digitally draw and how to animate. And I think I've set myself up for success in the future so I don't become a starving artist. Thank you.
Women only make up 16.1% of the physics workforce, and it's not getting better. There's a less than 1% difference in the percentage of women in physics 14 years ago and right now. Throughout elementary, middle, and high school, girls show just as much proficiency and interest in STEM classes as boys, but they are much less likely to pursue a STEM major in college, particularly in the physical sciences. The biggest reasons for this are that girls are told they should pursue other, more feminine professions, or that they aren't smart enough to do a hard major. Without enough female role models working in these fields, Girls often don't have the motivation to continue to pursue these interests, leading to such great disparities between genders. I have personal experience with this. People didn't take a young girl with aspirations to be an astrophysicist very seriously. Many times throughout my life, I was told that I should choose a different interest or that I would change my mind. But luckily, my passions were strong enough and I had enough people supporting me that I didn't let those comments get to me. I distinctly remember sitting in the floor of my grandparents' living room, transfixed by the images on the TV. I'd wait for hours for my favorite kind of TV show to come on, space documentaries. While that may seem like an odd favorite for most of you, there was nothing more exciting to my 6-year-old self than a well-made space show. Some of my favorites growing up were How the Universe Works and Through the Wormhole. When I was younger, many of my friends wanted to go into a STEM field, whether it was to be a mathematician, an engineer, or even a computer scientist. But as time passed, many of these friends lost their passions for STEM. While it's not wrong for their interest to change, their reasoning was disturbing to me. The most common reasons my friends gave for not wanting to pursue STEM was that they didn't think they were smart enough or because someone had encouraged them to do something else. Even as a child, this bothered me. But now, I've decided to do what I can to change that. For my capstone project, I wanted to help spread my love of space science to students younger than me by giving them a resource similar to what first caught my attention. I wanted to create resources for teachers so that they could make space science more interesting for their students. But first, I needed to do research on what kind of resources were available and what kind of resources teachers needed. I interviewed some of the elementary and middle school teachers here to get their input on what their students found interesting and what each grade level could understand. I also spent hours looking for educational space science videos, and I found quite a few. But what I noticed was that the videos that were aimed at a younger audience were often all completely animated and looked very fake. Often, the planets and stars even had faces. While I understand the idea behind this, what made me so fascinated as a child was knowing what these things really looked like, even if it was just a computer-generated model. I also noticed that while some of the videos were well made, they often did not come with any other types of resources, so teachers either had to make them themselves or just show the video. I wanted to keep kids interested, but I also wanted the information to really stick. After talking with teachers, I decided that my best course of action would be to create 3 resources to go with each mini documentary. The first resource I created was guided notes. Guided notes help students build note-taking skills as well as helping them retain the information. The second resource I created was a quizzes, which for those of you who aren't familiar is an online quiz game students can play and compete with each other, but it can also be used as a study tool. The third resource I created was a Google form assessment. This resource is mostly for the teachers. It prevents a teacher from having to create their own test or from finding one that doesn't exactly cover the content in the video. My goal was to create an easy, accessible, streamlined system for teachers to help to educate their students in an interesting and effective way. Originally, my plan was to create 4 videos, but research and especially editing the videos took a lot longer than expected. However, this project is not over. I currently have 2 fully polished videos with all 3 resources for each. The first video is on the solar system and is aimed at a younger audience.
One of them stands out among the rest. One was something none of the others have: life. A planetary system is a collection of planets and their moons in orbit around a star. Our planetary system is called the solar system. In the center is our star, the sun.
The second video I created was on star formation and star death and was aimed at a middle to high school audience.
The majority of a protostar's energy comes from the initial collapse, but over a period of millions of years, the colossal pressure and sizzling temperatures in the star's core cause the nuclei of hydrogen atoms to join and become helium. This is called nuclear fusion.
Both of these and all of their resources are uploaded onto a website I created for this project. As I continue my journey to becoming an astrophysicist, I want to expand this website to encapsulate a lot of topics for both students and teachers to use. My goal is to inspire a love of space science in some of these students so that they can push through any negativity or self-doubt they may face. The first step to confident students is good and interesting teaching resources. This project is the beginning of my mission to not only become a successful astrophysicist, but to inspire and be a role model for the next generation of women. Thank you.
So y'all know how much I love math, right? I mean, what's not to love? One of my most favorite math-related things to do is to create graphs. The graph that I created here shows a linear trend line from 13 to 18 and ranges from 0 to 55. Sadly, though, this presentation isn't about math. It's about something much more important: shoes. If you haven't already put this together, this graph here is of my accumulating shoe collection throughout the years. So, at age 13, I had a pair, and all the way up today, I'm up to 55. And yes, I really do have 55 pairs. I especially love all of my shoes, but I enjoy others as well. I feel like the shoes that people wear on their feet serve as an informal message to those around them. Sometimes that message is really loud and very evident, and others are much harder to decipher. That's why I have so many pairs, because I feel that each pair serves as an informal message to those around me. And as well, it's pretty flattering to get compliments on your shoes. The Air Jordan 1 first came out in 1985. This was the first shoe ever created for an individual basketball player. Michael Jordan, of course. As of right now, this is my favorite pair of Jordans, the Into the Spider-Verses. So, after accumulating all these shoes and having them be the focal point of my day, I figured the next logical step would be for me to create my own pair. With this project, I wanted to recreate what the developers went through to create such a shoe. Quite an undertaking, right? The only problem with this is that I had no idea what went into creating a shoe. I've never even thought about it. I had no idea I had no idea what I was getting myself into. So, to start this whole shebang, I asked my grandmother to give me some pointers on how to sew. The basics: threading the needle, lining up the material, and using the pedal correctly. As you would guess, she was very enthusiastic and more than willing to help me in any way that she could. I think now, though, she's going to ask me how to make her own pair when she decides to. The next thing I had to do is I watched a lot of videos. I watched videos on videos of Air Jordan 1s, Air Force 1s, Nike Dunks. I watched videos on stitching patterns, sole attachment. After a while, I started seeing double. No, but these videos saved me and saved my project. Simply having a visual representation of what I was doing made everything so much easier and so much more doable. While watching these videos, I learned that most shoe creators had some sort of pattern or design to base their shoes off of. So once I learned this, I went searching for a pattern to purchase. After the pattern arrived, I got it printed out and I measured each individual piece to see how much material I was going to need. It came out to be about a yard of suede and vinyl. So obviously, I went and bought that yard. I tried a couple of different places, but settled with Joann's. 1, because it wasn't crazy expensive. 2, because I could actually go and touch the material. And 3, because I could get exactly what kind and color material that I wanted. As for the soles, I initially wanted to mold them myself. But I soon learned that this would be way out of my area of expertise and way out of my budget. So while searching for a pattern, I came across a pair of soles and purchased those as well. The next step in my process was finding a sewing machine that was strong enough to sew through multiple layers of suede and vinyl. The Knox Makerspace was recommended to me for the machine that I was looking for. While at the Makerspace, I did a lot of sewing. But as well, I did a bunch of cutting, gluing, molding, and flipping. Brian Howard, the leatherworking guy there, taught me everything there was to know about working with leather. He was extremely knowledgeable and gave me very useful tips and guidance while I was going through my process. One thing that he may have had a bit of trouble was teaching me how to use this thing. The beast was a lot scarier than Grammy's machine, I'll tell you this much. After I accumulated all, I'm getting out of pace here. If there's one thing that is true, it's that I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I had no earthly idea there was going to be so many parts, steps, and components that went into creating a shoe. And obviously you're like, duh, Dustin. But let me tell you, there are probably 5 times as many steps as you would think. Quite an undertaking, right? With this project, I started off not even knowing how to sew. I did not know how to use a pattern. I did not know how to cut material out. I didn't even know where to buy material. I can say now with confidence, though, after 40 hours sewing, 15 hours cutting, and 25 hours gluing, I know how to do these things. On top of this, I'm an extremely picky person. Finding exactly what I wanted and getting things to be exactly how I wanted them to be was extreme turmoil for me. What made it worse was when I couldn't go back and do things over again. It really had me fighting with my better judgment, but I took what I had and worked with it. I feel like those inconveniences were good for me, regardless of how stressful or annoying they may have been. I feel like I learned a lot about myself. I learned patience, time management, planning skills, and more importantly, I learned to love what I do. I'm someone who usually does school projects because I have to. With this project, I did it because I wanted to. I enjoyed this project. Regardless if it made me freak out every now and then. So, 20 instructional videos later and 100 hours working, I can say that I've successfully made my own Air Jordan 1. They are extremely warped, the stitching is terrible, and the size is probably not even a 10, but that means you can definitely tell that I made them. So, I introduce today the newest addition to my collection, the Air Dustin 1. Thank you. I'm actually wearing them today if you'd like to take a look, but please don't look too hard. They won't be as cool, I promise you. But if you're interested in purchasing a pair of handmade Air Dustin 1s, feel free to hit me up. I'll only charge you $250. They'll be here in 2 months, okay? Thank you.
I am a quitter. For 4 years, I was on the CBA boys basketball team, and at the end of my sophomore year, I quit. The decision to quit was something that I struggled with for a long time, both before and after I made it. This was because basketball was a safe place for me. I had a large friend group, I was physically active almost every day, and I had done it for 4 years, building relationships and skills along the way. Because of these things, I felt the need to stay, both to protect myself and to fulfill an amorphous set of obligations I felt like I had to my teammates and to my coaches. I felt like I was quitting on them. The reason I quit was to focus on a new sport that had captured my heart, climbing. Now, you are probably thinking, Remy, what are these incredibly well-drawn, I know, pictures of yourself that you're showing us? These pictures are from my Capstone product, a webtoon series by the name of Send that explores the very same decision that I made between climbing and basketball. A webtoon series is essentially a graphic novel, published online and meant to be read on a phone. I went with a visual medium because I feel very often unsatisfied with my own self-expression through just words. And I knew that in order to tell such an important and personal story, I needed the ability to express myself to the best of my abilities. The story has 6 chapters and details an analog of myself, discovering climbing and going on to have a deep internal struggle about what is best for him and what he really wants. The struggle culminates in the very same decision that I had to make between 2 parts of myself. The part that wanted to stay safe, but ultimately stagnant and unfulfilled, and the part that wanted to reach out for something new and incredibly fulfilling. Through the story and artwork, I wanted to portray 3 key themes: identity, passion, and transitioning away from a safe but ultimately unfulfilling place. I did this through key artistic decisions in regards to lighting and line work, as well as coloring. The places where he fell out of place are bleak, with my drawings of him having rough and messy line work in the shading, while those that belong on the basketball court have smooth lines and cleanly blended textures, the same way I would go on to draw the main character once he discovered climbing, alongside an injection of color onto some of the most important pages. I split the work up into 3 steps: storyboarding, followed by line art, and then shading. I further split the work up over the course of the summer and the first 2 quarters, including winter break. Over the course of the summer, I made my original plans for the story. And then in the first quarter, I storyboarded everything. And in the second quarter, I did the line art and shading week to week. This setup and story is not what I originally imagined when I first planned out the story. I originally wanted to make 26 chapters, more than 4 times what I was able to get done. I wanted to make this many chapters because I wanted to portray the events that led up to my choice with the most accuracy as possible. The slow shift of my enjoyment away from basketball games and towards climbing trips. Unfortunately, I had severely underestimated the amount of time it would take to complete even 1 chapter, on top of overestimating the amount of free time I would have at home to actually work on my product while trying to balance my other classes, my social life, and, most relevant, my climbing. So, I cut down on the chapter number heavily and changed the story such that I could still complete my product and portray the themes and express myself to a satisfactory degree. The 6 months that I spent working on my product and the 2 that I spent looking back on it for this very presentation have been invaluable in deepening my understanding of self-expression and reassuring myself of my own decisions. With every chapter that I completed and published, I reminded myself of why I left basketball and deepened my understanding of my own identity, both the parts that I still cherish and hold close and the parts I have since left behind. Creating this series has shown me how valuable an experience leaving basketball was. Through it, I have gained 2 new avenues of self-expression, my climbing and my art. While my climbing gives me the freedom to just be myself in nature and a break from the stressful and difficult parts of being a person, my art gives me a great introspection into myself in a medium that I feel comfortable and confident showing to other people. As I said before, I feel that I don't have the ability to properly express myself through just words, and this series has allowed me to express myself greatly with very few. And when I published that final chapter, I came to a realization. We all make transitions in our lives, whether it be between schools, jobs, relationships, sports, any of the numerous different kinds of changes that we have to make from the first day we gain consciousness to where we all are today. These decisions that we make to leave things behind for our own betterment are not quitting. And I hope that my product can help someone else see that, and even help motivate them to find their own identity, their own passion, or even transition out of something that they have done for a long time that no longer brings them happiness or satisfaction. Because I made one of those transitions almost 2 years ago, and I couldn't be happier. Thank you.
Class of 2024, seniors, you have done it. The senior capstone presentations are complete. We are so proud of you, and I hope that all of you that are here tonight understand the diversity of humanity. I am so impressed every night that I spend with these seniors, this being our 7th. And I want to thank Jen Bruce just real quickly for that beautiful recap of what the senior capstone is all about that you gave in the beginning. Seniors, although you are so diverse, I noticed some commonalities in your journeys tonight. And I wonder if you all might have noticed some of these too. First, it took an idea. You had to have a dream. And many of you, not only do you have to have a dream, but you have to have some kind of decision to pursue that dream. So your dreams were all different, lots of varieties, but you all started with an idea. And then you faced some challenges. I heard each one of you talk about the difficulties, the challenges, the perseverance that it took. And I hope that you all understand It's really simple. We can do hard things. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of perseverance. But you have shown us tonight that we can do hard things. The next thing I noticed was the trusty advisor. Isn't it true that we all need an advisor? We all need somebody to come along and help us when we get stuck. I appreciated that you all mentioned by name teachers in this room. You mentioned by name professionals in the industries that you all sought support and help from. So I want to take just a moment to mention, in the theme of the night as we are summiting this mountaintop, there's some Sherpas that come alongside of us. And so some of them I want to thank tonight. I want to thank again all of our judges and all of the people that have helped us tonight as Capstone advisors. Thank you very much for your support and all of your work with our students tonight. It takes a village, and you are a very important part of this night. I want to thank all of the CBA teachers that are in the room tonight and all that are not. This graduating class would not be where they are without the support of you as teachers. And I heard many of your names mentioned tonight, but each one of these students will think back to teachers here at CBA that helped them complete this summit to the top of their mountain. So trusty advisor, family and friends. For parents that are here, this is a partnership. So family and friends that are here supporting our students, thank you so much for all of your work. And lastly, I just want to thank you guys as seniors. You guys have helped each other a lot. You guys have been on an incredible journey here at CBA. And as you start to see the end of your senior year, you guys will have opportunities to thank each other and show each other support. So you guys have been advisors. And I think the last commonality that I saw, I think all of you will, and maybe seniors, you might experience some of this, is the satisfaction of accomplishment. You all have done something amazing. And in the theme of this class, you have invited us all in this room to see the viewpoint from your summit experience. So the satisfaction of your accomplishment and the way that you were able to share that with all of us tonight is our privilege to join you on your summit experience at the top of your mountain. And so with that, I want to close and say thank you to all of you. I really hope you enjoyed the view, and we will see you next year to be more inspired by our seniors.